going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte coming to you today with a video about the top of the Atlantic Division. Who will take the crown in the Eastern Conference's Atlantic Division in 2024? We have two really solid teams out there right now. We've got the Florida Panthers and the Boston Bruins. These are familiar foes with each other as they've, had a couple run-ins recently, last year's playoffs, and looking at both of these teams right now, they're kind of coming from different angles this year, but they're both teams that realistically could win the Stanley Cup, right? So we're going to take a look at these guys in today's video. So the Florida Panthers and the Boston Bruins, how did they get here? Where are they at? What's kind of going into it? So, obviously we know the Florida Panthers 2 years ago won the President's Trophy, right? Really solid season for them, and things flamed out in the playoffs. And then last year, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals, beating Boston, shocking the Bruins in the first round of the playoffs. Meanwhile, for the Bruins the past couple years, specifically last year, winning the President's Trophy, getting knocked out in the first round by these Florida Panthers, there's a little bit of a rivalry there. So now the fact that both these teams in the standings are so close to each other, it's a chef's kiss. This looks like a perfect second or third round playoff series that I'm kind of penciling in, and that's probably a jinx, but I think these two teams are really solid this year. They're perfectly built. There's just so much harmony throughout the lineup. I hate using that word, but I can't think of a better word to use, is where things are at for both these teams. They have the perfect amount of grit, defensive structure, and scoring, and good goaltending, that they are where they're at for a reason. And, looking at the standings for these guys right now, right? Yeah, Boston currently on top right now, 95 points. Florida right there with 94. Again, they also have a game in hand. And, you look at the wins, the Florida Panthers are definitely the team that right now is the team to beat with 45 wins on the season. They're a real juggernaut. I mean, you look at that record at home, really, really solid. For the Florida Panthers, the plus minus, their last 10 games, they are just a freaking wagon right now. They are really, really solid and kind of coming into their own at the perfect time, despite being on a 2-game losing streak right now. So, really something that I'm interested in looking at here is the rest of the way. And you look at where the Panthers have been. I mean, a 9-game winning streak, right? That was back in January, right? And then you look up, you got a 4-game winning streak here back in the end of January. You have a 6-game winning streak in February. And now their most recent 6-game winning streak, which ended earlier this month. The Florida Panthers over the last, really since the beginning of 2024, are definitely one of the hottest teams in the league by far. And like I said earlier in the video, the combination of good defensive structure, good goaltending, and scoring some goals, and that little bit of grit, that is the recipe for success in 2024 for the NHL. And the Florida Panthers have the perfect combination of all of it. And you're kind of seeing that with how their season has gone. Now, what's really interesting is I'd love to see these teams meet up before the end of the season. And in fact, they do. And not only once, but twice. We're going to see 2 more games, home and away for each of these teams down the stretch. Next week, they're going to be up in Florida. That's going to be a really good game. And then they're going to be in Boston at the end of the year in April. Actually, the last road game of the season for the Florida Panthers. So I'm expecting a lot of fireworks in those 2 games between these 2 teams. And hopefully they turn out to be games where they don't scratch everybody and just try to be healthy for the playoffs. They're actually going to be looking to play well against each other. We'll see how things go. But I'm really interested to see how things go for these teams. And right now, if I'm looking at both of them together, who would have a better run in the postseason? And I think you have to evaluate the Florida Panthers making it to the Stanley Cup final last year. Is that going to fatigue them in the playoffs? We've seen teams in Florida recently, not too long ago, go on deep runs year after year after year. The Tampa Bay Lightning. But they had the depth to do that. Do the Florida Panthers have that ability? I think they do. I really do think that is possible, especially considering some of the injuries the Florida Panthers already have on their roster. They aren't even a fully healthy roster right now. And, for the Boston Bruins, yeah, they've added the sprinkle of the young guys that are coming in, playing well, some fresh legs down the stretch. I think that's a good thing, but is the goaltending going to be able to do what they do? And that's really what this is all about, is which goalie tandem are you more comfortable with? I think that is the true pinnacle matchup here. And let's take a look. Let's see if I could find it. Like I said, so looking at the goalies, I think that is truly the big barometer here. And like I said, these aren't even small injuries, right? Aaron Ekblad, Sam Bennett, those are two versatile players in their forward and defensive cores. Those aren't just slouch guys out of the lineup. And, looking at the goaltending, like I said, you got Bobrovsky, who's been out of this world this year, Stolars, who's injured, but he's been right there. So, it's been pretty good for these guys, but in all honesty, I just don't see anybody's goalie tandem being better than Boston's, and that's really the crux of the situation here for the Florida Panthers is their goalies going to be able to outduel what Boston has? And, I like Bobrovsky's numbers and things like that, and if it's just coming down to one goalie being hot, well, it might be Sergei Bobrovsky, but in terms of who could step in and things like that, Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark, those are two really solid goalies together. And I don't know, maybe that ends up being a detriment to them like it was last year in the playoffs, but in all honesty, if I had to pick a group of goalies, a goalie tandem going into the playoffs that I'd be more comfortable with, it would be Boston right now. So I don't know. If I had to pick today, who's going to win the division and potentially who's going to win the playoffs, might be two completely different things, right? Because obviously you'd prefer to be the team that gets deeper in the playoffs than the team that wins the division, right? Because at the end of the day, it's just a banner you hang in the stadium. You really want to go deep in the playoffs, right? That's the more important thing. So to answer the question, I'm going to go with just going with both. If they win the division, let's go with them winning and going deeper in the playoffs than the other. I think the Bruins are the team to do it. And here's why. The reason I say that is the goalie tandem's better, right? I think the fact that they're a little more rested, I think could be a benefit for the Bruins. And the other thing is, you can't take the motivation reason out of the equation here. Don't think for a second the Bruins don't remember. They didn't forget what happened last year in the playoffs against this Florida Panthers team. And these two games down the stretch and the rest of the regular season and the rest of the playoffs, however far Boston goes, they're going to remember what the Florida Panthers did to them last year. The regular season matters, but it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things because all we remember from the Bruins last year is how the epic collapse happened. In the moment, you remember how good the Bruins were, but looking back now, in the history books, we're always going to remember the downfall. And how they fell to a team that barely made the playoffs, and they got crushed in Game 7 in a crushing fashion. The Bruins and their players did not forget that. And I ultimately think the Bruins are going to go on a run this year. Nobody's talking about the Bruins because Bergeron's not there, Chara's not there. All those guys are no longer there. So theoretically, they should be worse. But I think there's something to be said about motivation and what motivates you day after day after day. And I think for the Bruins, they're the team to do that. And they made some additions at the deadline, bringing in guys like Pat Maroon and things like that just make them more of a pain in the ass than they already are. I'm really watching to see what the Bruins do this year. They're the team nobody's talking about right now that probably should be talked about more. So that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Hopefully you liked it. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe down below. And let me know which team you think is more of a threat in the playoffs this year. Is it the Florida Panthers, the team everybody's talking about, the big sexy pick? Or is it the Boston Bruins, who maybe got humbled a little bit last year, and they're a little bit more motivated than they were last year, and they're going to go on that run? Let me know your guys' thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Peace out, guys.